In a quiet, unassuming town in the United States, everything appeared perfectly normal. Streets were lined with neat, well-kept houses, trimmed lawns, and colorful flower beds that gave the impression of care and stability. Children played outside, laughing and shouting, chasing after balls and riding their bikes, while parents watched from porches, sipping iced tea or chatting over fences. On the surface, it was a town that seemed safe, predictable, and wholesome. The kind of place where everyone knew each other's names, and strangers were rare. But beneath this picture-perfect exterior, a horrifying secret was about to shatter the calm, leaving the neighborhood shaken to its core. It was a warm late afternoon when little Emily, a bright and lively 7-year-old girl, vanished from her own backyard. Her mother, Jessica, had stepped inside for only a few minutes, intending to tidy up the house and prepare snacks for her daughter. Emily had been playing a game she had invented herself, running between the yard and the swing set, weaving in and out of imaginary obstacles. She was carefree, energetic, and completely unaware that danger was closer than she could ever imagine. The sound of her laughter filled the yard, blending seamlessly with the distant chirping of birds and the rustling of leaves in the soft summer breeze. Across the street, Michael, a man in his early 30s, lived with his wife and 2 children. On the surface, he seemed like the perfect neighbor. He was always polite, smiling, and ready to lend a helping hand. He offered to carry groceries, fix small problems for neighbors without asking, and participated actively in community events. Parents trusted him without hesitation, often leaving their children under his watchful eye at neighborhood gatherings. Michael had cultivated a reputation of dependability and friendliness over the years, and no one could have imagined the darkness lurking behind his calm exterior. When Jessica noticed that Emily hadn't returned inside after a few minutes, she initially thought her daughter had wandered into a friend's yard or gone to check on a neighbor. She called out Emily's name, expecting to hear the usual giggles in response. But the backyard remained silent. Minutes stretched into what felt like an eternity, and fear began to take root in her chest. Jessica's heart pounded as she rushed outside, scanning every corner of the yard and peering over fences into neighboring yards. Anxiety grew as she realized that Emily was nowhere to be found. Michael had been in his garage that afternoon, absorbed in tinkering with tools and listening to music through his headphones. When he noticed the growing commotion in the neighborhood, the frantic shouts and hurried footsteps, he quickly stepped outside. Immediately, he offered to help search, calling out Emily's name along the streets and guiding neighbors toward areas they might have overlooked. He appeared deeply concerned, joining groups scouring back alleys, checking parks, and even heading toward the nearby woods. To everyone watching, Michael's actions seemed genuine and heroic. A man doing everything he could to help a frightened mother and a terrified community. Meanwhile, Jessica's panic escalated. She dialed the local police, reporting Emily as missing. Officers arrived within the hour, taking statements from everyone who had been near the yard that day. They asked about Michael, the friendly neighbor who had rushed to help organize the search. Jessica mentioned that he was the last adult who had interacted with Emily before she disappeared, but also emphasized that he had always been kind and trustworthy. Other neighbors confirmed his good character, noting his helpful nature and long-standing reputation in the community. The officers, taking note of his involvement, were unaware of the sinister truth hidden behind Michael's calm, reassuring exterior. As night fell, the neighborhood's calm facade began to crumble. Streetlights cast long shadows across empty streets, illuminating faces filled with worry, disbelief, and despair. Search parties expanded. Volunteers joined from nearby towns, and every open space alleyways, parks, even the edge of the small local forest was combed meticulously. Flyers with Emily's smiling photos were posted on telephone poles, pinned to store windows, and circulated online, while social media accounts exploded with desperate pleas for information. Local news crews arrived, broadcasting live from the neighborhood, interviewing anxious parents, and capturing the growing tension. Through it all, Michael remained at the center of the search. He coordinated volunteers, suggested search zones, and spoke to reporters with a voice that conveyed concern and leadership. To outsiders, he was the picture of a caring, attentive neighbor. Yet behind that mask, Michael's reality was chillingly different. In the silence of his home, he replayed every moment of that afternoon, recalling each detail and ensuring that no mistake had been made that could point suspicion in his direction. His careful planning and knowledge of the neighborhood allowed him to manipulate the search subtly. He knew which areas would be checked first, which would take longer to reach, and how to appear cooperative without revealing the truth. Every smile, every word of reassurance he offered to the searchers and Jessica was part of the mask he wore to perfection. Michael had cultivated the perfect balance of concern and control. He comforted Jessica when she cried, reassured volunteers when they feared the worst, and gave statements to reporters with unwavering composure. Yet his mind was far from the chaos around him. He was already calculating the next steps, measuring how the investigation might unfold, and ensuring that he remained untouchable in the eyes of law enforcement. The contrast between his inner thoughts and outward behavior created a chilling dissonance. The friendly, helpful neighbor was in reality the orchestrator of the entire tragedy. As the hours turned into night, the neighborhood's anxiety became palpable. Parents huddled together, sharing theories and fears, while children were brought indoors, crying for their lost friend. The community's trust had been shaken, replaced with a gnawing sense of vulnerability. Emily, a symbol of innocence and safety, had disappeared from a place that should have been her sanctuary. The horrifying possibility that someone close could be involved began to creep into the minds of some, though no one yet suspected the man who had positioned himself as a hero. Meanwhile, Michael maintained a careful vigilance over every move made by the searchers. He guided them subtly toward areas that offered plausible but ultimately useless leads, keeping critical spots untouched. When asked to check remote areas, he often volunteered, appearing eager to help while ensuring no evidence would be discovered. His knowledge of the backyard, the surrounding yards, and even the small wooded paths nearby gave him an advantage that none of the searchers could comprehend. Every decision he made was calculated to control the narrative and maintain his public image as a caring neighbor. By midnight, exhausted volunteers returned home, frustrated and worried, while Jessica stayed awake, crying in despair, praying for her daughter's safety. Michael, however, returned to his home, where silence allowed him to plan his next moves. The calm exterior he had presented to the neighborhood for hours had succeeded in convincing everyone of his innocence. Outside, the night air was still, carrying the distant sounds of searchers calling Emily's name and the low hum of news helicopters flying overhead. Inside, Michael's mind remained cold, calculated, and focused, a terrifying reminder that appearances can be deceiving, and that evil can hide behind the most ordinary of faces. The morning after Emily's disappearance brought with it a heavy, almost suffocating tension over the neighborhood. Dawn had barely broken, yet parents were already awake, whispering hurried warnings to their children, urging them to stay close and avoid wandering outside. Some parents gathered in small clusters, sharing fearful speculation and comparing notes about where their children had been the previous day. The air carried a mixture of anxiety, frustration, and heartbreak. Volunteers poured into the streets, forming search parties that fanned out into parks, alleyways, and the small patches of woods bordering the town. Every second that passed without finding Emily deepened the community's dread and heightened the fear that something truly terrible had occurred. Michael, true to his cultivated persona, was one of the first to volunteer. He walked the streets with a noticeable urgency, calling Emily's name loudly and repeatedly. His voice carried a trembling edge, one that seemed genuine enough to convince anyone who listened that he shared in the community's grief. He organized small groups of volunteers, suggesting search patterns in areas that had been overlooked. He helped coordinate the deployment of search dogs, speaking with handlers and offering strategic advice. Neighbors, exhausted and terrified, began to rely on his guidance. Some even assumed that if anyone knew something that could help, it was Michael. To them, his presence was a lifeline, a steady hand in a sea of panic. As the day progressed, the authorities started to piece together a timeline of Emily's disappearance. Small inconsistencies in Michael's story began to emerge. He had claimed that he was in his garage fixing a shelf at the exact time Emily vanished. While many neighbors accepted this explanation as plausible, the police filed the detail for further examination. Every question asked, every seemingly minor discrepancy, became part of a web of suspicion that no one yet fully understood. Officers noted the details quietly, recording them meticulously, but at this point, Michael remained above any real suspicion. Meanwhile, Emily's story quickly captured the attention of local media. Television stations broadcast her smiling face from school photos, highlighting the innocence that had so suddenly been taken from the community. Social media exploded with desperate pleas for help. Posts were shared thousands of times, with hashtags dedicated to finding Emily and raising awareness. Community pages organized virtual search parties, and neighbors who couldn't physically join the search contributed tips, sightings, or resources. Amid this growing frenzy, Michael appeared on camera multiple times, speaking passionately about the importance of staying vigilant and united. His words were calm, measured, and reassuring, providing a sense of stability in a neighborhood that was fraying at the edges. But behind closed doors, Michael's mind was operating on a completely different plane. While he projected concern, empathy, and desperation to the world, internally he was calculating, planning, and controlling every aspect of the unfolding drama. He knew precisely which areas the police would prioritize and which sections the volunteers would cover first. He had meticulously ensured that no evidence linking him to Emily's disappearance remained in plain view. By involving himself so actively in the search, he positioned himself at the center of attention, skillfully deflecting suspicion while shaping the narrative to suit his needs. Every step he took, every instruction he gave, was measured to maintain the illusion of innocence. Search teams worked tirelessly throughout the day. Parks were scoured, alleyways examined, and wooded areas combed with painstaking attention. Drones hovered overhead, scanning the terrain with infrared cameras. Police dogs tracked scents through the morning dew, sniffing relentlessly for any trace of Emily. Volunteers shouted her name in unison, echoing across the quiet streets and open fields. Despite the extensive effort, no sign of Emily emerged. Every unanswered call, every fruitless search, deepened the community's fear. Michael remained a constant presence, guiding the volunteers with apparent dedication, while subtly manipulating the progress of the search. By midday, the police began to exchange quiet, cautious glances. How could a neighbor, so helpful and so eager, be entirely uninvolved? The idea was tempting, yet unthinkable. Michael had woven himself so thoroughly into the fabric of the search that anyone suggesting his involvement seemed almost absurd. Still, subtle questions began to arise. Officers noted them quietly, asking themselves whether his presence was too convenient, his knowledge too precise. These small, almost imperceptible doubts formed the earliest seeds of suspicion. Seeds that, if nurtured, would later grow into crucial evidence. Michael, of course, was aware of these budding questions. He remained vigilant, constantly scanning the streets for any hint that someone might suspect him. Each interaction with the police was carefully measured. His tone remained calm, his expressions neutral, but every word was deliberate, designed to project honesty and sincerity. When volunteers made mistakes or veered off course in the search, he offered guidance with patience, never revealing the knowledge he held privately. His manipulation was subtle but effective. By controlling the narrative of the search, he ensured that attention remained on finding Emily, not on the man orchestrating the entire operation. As afternoon bled into evening, the neighborhood began to tire. Families returned home with heavy hearts, their hopes diminished by the hours of unanswered searching. Emily's parents remained vigilant, refusing to leave the streets, their minds consumed by fear and uncertainty. Flyers were posted in every visible location. Social media updates continued, and the local news ran continuous coverage, keeping the story in the public eye. Through it all, Michael maintained his careful balance, offering comfort, leadership, and reassurance. He was the steady rock in a sea of despair, a neighbor everyone turned to for guidance, even as he held the chilling truth in his grasp. Night fell, bringing with it a quiet that was almost unnatural, a stillness broken only by the distant hum of news vans and the occasional siren. Search parties dwindled, the last groups returning home exhausted and defeated. Jessica, her eyes swollen from crying, refused to leave the streets, praying silently for any sign of her daughter. Michael, meanwhile, returned to the calm of his home, slipping behind the facade he had perfected for the day. Outside, the neighborhood remained on edge, unaware that the man who had been their guide, their helper, and their comfort was, in reality, orchestrating the entire nightmare. He reviewed every detail, considering what would happen next, calculating each move with meticulous precision. In that quiet, dark house, the contrast between the outside world and Michael's private reality was stark. To the neighborhood, it was a hero. To the police, he was a concerned neighbor, but in truth, He was a predator cloaked in civility. A man whose outward concern masked the chilling control he held over the unfolding tragedy. Every strategy he employed, every interaction he staged, brought him closer to ensuring that the horrifying truth would remain hidden. At least for now, the vanishing of Emily was no ordinary disappearance. It was the first ripple in a tide that would reveal a darkness lying just beneath the surface of an ordinary neighborhood. A darkness that no one, not even those closest to him, could have imagined. And Michael, smiling and helpful to all who watched, remained at the center of it. The calm eye in the storm he had created. The discovery of Emily's body sent a shockwave through the community. Before the investigators, it was the beginning of the end. The web of suspicion that had been slowly forming around Michael now tightened with suffocating force. Detective Miller, the lead investigator on the case, felt it in his gut. Michael's performance as the grieving, helpful neighbor was almost too perfect. It was a meticulously crafted facade, and Miller knew that all it would take was one loose thread to unravel the entire charade. The investigation pivoted, its focus narrowing exclusively on the man who had placed himself at the center of the search. Detectives began by re-interviewing everyone in the neighborhood, this time with a different line of questioning. They weren't just asking about Emily, they were asking about Michael. They cross-referenced his statements, his movements, and his interactions in the days following the disappearance. A pattern of subtle manipulation emerged. He had consistently steered search parties away from the wooded path where Emily was found, always under the guise of covering more ground elsewhere. He had been the one to dismiss early suggestions of foul play, calming other neighbors with reassurances that Emily had likely just wandered off. The first tangible crack in Michael's alibi came from an unexpected source. A child, a young boy who lived a few houses down, recalled seeing Michael washing his car late on the night Emily disappeared. It was an odd time for such a chore, especially with the neighborhood in a state of panic. When questioned, Michael had a ready explanation. He had spilled a coffee and wanted to clean it up before it stained. It was plausible, almost dismissible, but for Detective Miller, it was the loose thread he had been looking for. It was an action that deviated from the script of the concerned neighbor. Armed with this new piece of information, Miller secured a warrant to search Michael's property and, most importantly, his car. The forensic team descended on the house, a stark contrast to the friendly volunteer searches Michael had once led. They combed through every inch of his home, his garage, and his vehicle. Michael watched from his doorway, his expression a careful blend of confusion and cooperation. He offered the team coffee, his hands steady, his voice even, but his eyes, for the first time, betrayed a flicker of fear. Inside the car, the forensic team went to work. To the naked eye, the vehicle was immaculate, almost unnaturally clean, but under the powerful glow of forensic lights, the truth began to reveal itself. In the trunk, tucked away in the seam of the carpet, they found it. A single, minuscule fiber. It was bright red. The team carefully collected the sample and sent it for immediate analysis. The results came back within hours, confirming what Miller already suspected. The fiber was a perfect match for the red sweater Emily had been wearing on the day she vanished. The time for games was over. Detective Miller and his team returned to Michael's house, this time not as guests, but as arbiters of justice. They found him in his living room, reading a book, The Picture of Calm. Miller laid a small evidence bag containing the red fiber on the coffee table between them. "We found this in the trunk of your car, Michael," he said, his voice low and steady. "Can you explain what it is?" For a moment, Michael stared at the fiber, his mind racing, searching for one last lie, one final piece of misdirection. But there was none. The calm, helpful neighbor persona dissolved, replaced by a chilling emptiness. The mask shattered, and for the first time, the monster beneath was visible. A cold, venomous rage flashed in his eyes. He lunged, not in an attempt to escape, but in a final, desperate act of defiance. The detectives were ready. In an instant, they subdued him, the clink of handcuffs echoing the finality of his capture. As Michael was led from his home, neighbors emerged from their houses, drawn by the commotion. They watched in stunned silence as the man who had comforted them, who had led their searches, was placed in the back of a police car. The sight was a cocktail of horror, betrayal, and a profound, gut-wrenching relief. Emily's parents stood on their porch, holding each other, tears of grief now mixed with the bitter tears of justice. The neighborhood would never be the same. The trust that had once bound them together was irrevocably broken, a scar that would forever mark their quiet suburban street. But as the police car carrying Michael disappeared down the road, a fragile sense of peace began to settle. The gnawing tension that had held them captive for weeks finally began to recede. Justice had been served, not through a dramatic confession, but through the patient, methodical work of those who refused to give up, and the single red fiber that told the whole tragic story. Days passed, and Emily was still missing. The initial panic that had gripped the neighborhood had evolved into a relentless, gnawing tension. Parents whispered warnings to their children at every turn, urging them to stay indoors and avoid wandering anywhere without adult supervision. Schoolyards were eerily quiet, and local shops and parks seemed deserted. The usual chatter replaced with worried glances and hushed conversations. Flyers bearing Emily's smiling face were plastered on every visible surface. Telephone poles, store windows, and community bulletin boards. Social media had become a virtual hub for the search, as concerned citizens shared updates, organized volunteer efforts, and posted desperate pleas for any information. Every passing hour without news of Emily intensified the fear and the overwhelming sense that something terrible had occurred. Michael remained at the center of all search efforts, the ever-helpful neighbor whose involvement seemed crucial. From sunrise to sunset, he could be seen guiding search teams, coordinating volunteers, and offering emotional support to the parents who were teetering on the edge of despair. Two outsiders. His actions were exemplary. He spoke to reporters with controlled emotion, highlighting the need for community unity and vigilance. He comforted volunteers who grew frustrated with the fruitless searches, reassuring them that every effort mattered. Yet behind the calm, reassuring exterior, Michael was playing a more intricate and dangerous game. He was monitoring every move, every action of the investigators, and carefully managing how suspicion could potentially fall or be deflected. Investigators had been digging into the neighborhood, checking every possible angle. They started with the simplest questions. Who was the last person to see Emily? Where was everyone at the time of her disappearance? Michael's name inevitably appeared. Initially, his timeline seemed solid. He had been working in his garage, repairing shelves and organizing tools. His statements were consistent, his demeanor reassuring, and his actions outwardly helpful. He had even helped compile maps of the search areas, indicating spots volunteers might have missed. On the surface, there appeared to be nothing that could implicate him. But detectives, trained to notice subtleties that others might overlook, began to pick up on inconsistencies. Minor discrepancies arose in his story. Small moments when he claimed to be in the garage but was unaccounted for during crucial searches. They noticed the times he vanished briefly from volunteer groups, supposedly to retrieve equipment or check on other areas. None of these moments were long, none of them overtly suspicious, but in combination, they painted a pattern that demanded further attention. It was these tiny, almost imperceptible cracks in his story that would eventually form the foundation of the investigators' suspicions. The turning point came unexpectedly. Police received an anonymous tip regarding a hidden area near the edge of the neighborhood. The tip was vague but specific enough to demand action. Volunteers had previously noticed the earth along a seldom-used walking path appeared disturbed. The soil had an unnatural look, as though it had been shifted and compacted recently. Michael, predictably, volunteered to lead the investigation. He insisted on being the first on the scene, claiming he wanted to ensure that the area was searched thoroughly and safely. His eagerness seemed genuine to everyone watching, but in reality, he knew precisely what lay beneath the soil. As the investigation intensified, police brought in specialized resources. Cadaver dogs trained to detect human remains were deployed, and their reaction to the disturbed area was immediate and aggressive. The dogs barked, pawed at the ground, and refused to leave, indicating that something or someone was buried nearby. Michael Scamfacade never wavered. He knelt beside the dogs, offering words of encouragement to the handlers while mentally calculating the next steps to retain control over the investigation. His knowledge of the terrain and every hidden corner allowed him to subtly influence the search, guiding the teams in ways that appeared helpful but also diverted attention from critical areas where evidence could implicate him. Hours passed as the search team worked methodically to uncover what lay beneath the disturbed earth. Finally, a volunteer struck upon a partially covered hole near the walking path, a depression in the soil that had been cleverly concealed from casual view. Police immediately secured the area, bringing in additional personnel and forensic experts to examine the site. As the volunteers and officers carefully removed layers of dirt, the horrifying truth emerged. The remains of a young girl were buried hastily beneath the soil. Evidence of foul play was unmistakable. The neighborhood's worst fears had been realized. What had begun as a search for a missing child had now transformed into a criminal investigation, and the stakes had escalated dramatically. Throughout the tense process, Michael stayed close to the team, a calming presence amid the chaos. He spoke gently to the volunteers, offered comfort to Emily's frantic parents, and maintained a composed, heroic demeanor. "We're going to find out what happened," he sighed softly, holding the mother's hands, "and justice will be done." His words, his mannerisms, and his unwavering presence reinforced the belief that he was a neighbor who cared deeply, a man doing everything possible to help. Yet, in truth, he had orchestrated every step leading to this discovery. Every action he had taken in the previous days. Guiding volunteers, predicting police movements, steering attention was part of a calculated strategy to maintain control and delay any suspicion from reaching him. As the forensic team worked through the night, collecting evidence and documenting the scene, detectives began connecting the dots. They noted Michael's intimate knowledge of the area, his timing in relation to the disappearance, and the subtle inconsistencies in his statements. While no arrest could be made yet, the investigators now had reason to consider the possibility that someone from within the community, someone trusted and seemingly benevolent, could be involved. Patterns were emerging. Behaviors that previously appeared innocuous now seemed deliberate, and a web of suspicion slowly began to form around Michael. Despite the mounting evidence and quiet suspicions, Michael remained outwardly composed. He comforted everyone around him, never allowing his expressions to betray the inner calculations running through his mind. He continued to provide leadership, guide the volunteers, and offer solace to Emily's devastated parents. To anyone observing, he was the perfect neighbor. Steadfast, compassionate, and devoted. Yet the chilling reality, known only to him, was that he had engineered the tragedy, and the discovery of the girl's remains was the culmination of a horrifying series of actions he had carefully planned. By the time night fully descended, the neighborhood was enveloped in a heavy, almost suffocating darkness. The search area had been secured. The forensic team was meticulously cataloging evidence, and Emily's parents were inconsolable. Streetlights flickered over the silent homes, casting long shadows across empty streets. Volunteers drifted away, exhausted and haunted by the day's discovery, and Michael, still maintaining his public image of concern and heroism, retreated briefly to his home, reviewing every detail and ensuring that no trace of suspicion could link him to the crime. He was aware that investigators were watching, that patterns were forming, but he had calculated his moves to perfection. For now, the truth remained buried, much like Emily herself. The shocking discovery of Emily's body had changed everything. What began as a seemingly ordinary investigation into a missing child had now spiraled into a complex, chilling criminal case. The neighborhood's innocence had been shattered. Trust was fraying, and the community was left questioning every relationship, every gesture, and every act of kindness. And at the center of it all, Michael continued to stand, smiling, guiding, and manipulating a predator hiding in plain sight. His true nature, known only to himself.